It is 6 o'clock on Tuesday, April the 12th, and I greet you all for the Wenatchee School District Board of Directors regular meeting and ask that we all stand as I call you to order to say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I welcome everyone to this board meeting and thank you for joining us. Doy a todos una bienvenida a esta reunión de la mesa directiva del Distrito Escolar. Gracias por su asistencia. The meeting is conducted in English, but we do have translation services so that citizen comment may be spoken in Spanish and be repeated in English. Si alguien quiere hacer su comentario de ciudadano o recibir explicaciones en español, por favor indique su necesidad. Tenemos disponible un servicio de traducción. The first business item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Are there any requests to modify the consent agenda? There being none, I would ask if any member is willing to propose approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Laura. Do we have a second? Thank you, Julie. Do we have any discussion at this point? I believe not. Will all of those in favor of approving the consent agenda, which pardon me, I should have listed what was in it, includes the minutes for the workshop on the 21st of March and the regular meeting on the 22nd of March, vouchers and payroll, the personnel report, surplus report, second read of policies, contracts as listed in the agenda, field trips as listed in the agenda, and the Wenatchee High School summer athletic programs. Having corrected myself, will all board members indicate by saying aye if they are in favor of approving the consent agenda? Aye. I believe there are no nays. Thank you very much. The consent agenda is approved. The next item is citizen comments, which is the time for the board to welcome and listen to public comment. Comments do need to be scheduled beforehand. We have a 3-minute time limit, and I will warn speakers when their time is about to expire, as it isn't easy to watch the clock. And I believe we have 2 people who have signed up. Yeah, take the podium and let's hope the microphone works, and thank you very much. Yeah, and identify yourself as well as an introduction.
I know like squats. My name is Tucker Jackson. I have 2 kids in the district. I just wanted to come here to voice my support for the redistricting plan as it was laid out in the agenda before the meeting and for the 4-district plan. Appreciate you guys having some time to listen.
Thank you very much for coming and presenting that. And Kim, is there anybody online wanting to present? Yeah, okay. Roxana, okay. Welcome, and when you're ready.
Hello. Can you hear me?
We can hear you clearly, and make yourself comfortable. And the clock actually is 2:56 right now, but we'll give you a few extra seconds.
All right, sounds good. My name's Roxana Veneta. I teach 3rd grade at Columbia Elementary. I am here on behalf of other English language learners such as myself. And I'm also here as a parent of 2 children attending Columbia Elementary as well. And I'm here because I saw that you have a lot of openings for teaching positions. And as I scrolled through all those job openings, I thought of the children that I serve. And, you know, as a not only as a student of color, which I continue to be every day, I also consider myself very thankful that I also serve students of color as well. And that's the reason why I'm speaking out for them tonight. I have some numbers because, well, we as teachers work with data. And so when you come to these meetings, it's probably a good idea to present data as well. And so as I was going through those job openings, I thought, you know, you've changed your statement to promote equity. And within that statement, if you're promoting equity, then I'm hoping that you are looking at your hiring practices and what are you doing to make sure that you hire teachers of color to represent the students that the Wenatchee School District is serving. And so some of that research includes when you have teachers of color, they promote school belonging by engaging in instructional, institutional, and interpersonal practices that communicate that their success matters to them. And so that fosters a positive sense of self-efficacy, pride, and empowerment, which also turns out that you end up with better parent engagement. At the same time, when you hire teachers of color to serve students and other students, you're looking at higher test scores, graduation rates go up, and it is a way to show up for students of different backgrounds. You're also providing safe spaces, and also the interaction between students of color and teachers of color is related to improving academic growth overall. Teachers have more positive perceptions of the academic abilities of students with whom they share racial affinities.
Roxana, can I give you two quick choices? Continue if you've only
Sure.
got a little bit to say, or can finish and then submit more in writing.
I'll finish with just one quick statement.
That's
And it provides a sense of belonging, bonding, positive, and caring relationships. So I guess I'm urging you to take this back as a school board and as you know, all these schools that are hiring for teachers to think about how are you reaching out to teachers of color to come and apply for Wenatchee School District, given the fact that 50% of Washington's populations are students of colors, yet only 10% of teachers are of color. So that was my statement.
Thank you very much for coming forward and giving us your point of view.
Thank you.
Next item is a special presentation on budget and staffing update, and I can see our volunteer standing up and walking across the podium. Thank you.
So we are here today to talk about some of the impacts of the legislative session that we reviewed last board meeting anyways. So there was a number of staffing items that came across in the legislative session. So the IPD increase, and then also the House Bill 1664 staffing allocation changes. So I really wanted to dive deep into those today so you guys have a better understanding of the impacts to Wenatchee School District specifically, and not just that higher level state impact. So the first thing we're going to do is look at funded versus unfunded staffing units, because the difference between how many units we're funded for and how many staffing units we actually employ has a financial impact on the district. So first thing is, as you guys know, there's a lot of different revenue sources within the school district. There's, kind of simplifying it down, right? There's 7 general buckets. The buckets that support staffing as the biggest percent of their expenses are the items listed on the right. So taxes, so our local tax levy, state general, which is our general apportionment funds, state special, which is special ed funding, and some other categorical grant programs, and the federal special programs, which is this same thing as state special, just on the federal side. So basically 97.6% of our revenues, and this is from last year's budget, go to support staffing costs. So the primary expense within these categories is staffing and benefits. So this is the same slide as the last time. Just again, a reminder that most of our funding does come from state general funds and state special funds, which is mostly driven by enrollment. And there's very complicated formulas within the staffing formulas, but essentially students equals staffing units equals dollars. Also, as we talked about last time, a lot of the categories don't necessarily provide the correct number of staffing units to actually support the work that's done in schools. And that's where this inflationary adjustment comes in and really creates an impact. So as we talked about before, the inflationary factor, which is IPD, which as we know is 5.5 for next school year. So that inflationary adjustment applies and increases most all state revenues. So that's the bulk of the district's revenues. So the bulk of the district's revenues will increase by roughly that 5.5%, given, if our enrollment is relatively stable. Then there's categories of revenue that are not adjusted for that 5.5%. So and that's about 20% of our revenues that don't get adjusted. So that's our local taxes, the amount voted on by the taxpayers on the ballot measure, and then the federal special. So those are federal grants that we receive allocations from the federal government for. Again, lots of formulas in there, but they're not connected to any state local legislation. So they don't change because the state increased our funding. Also, special education, as we've talked about before, is not fully funded by the state. So Wenatchee School District specifically, roughly 87% of our special education expenses are actually covered by state funding or federal funding. So again, bottom line, roughly 87% of our expenses as a whole school district are related to staffing costs. So salaries, substitutes, that kind of thing, and the related benefits of those costs. So when we're looking at staffing units, about 5% of our certified staffing units, and this both certified and classified numbers include our administrators as well. So on the certified side, there's about 5% that are federally funded, and then the rest are state or local funded. And then on the classified side, that federal percentage is about 16%, so quite a bit higher on the federal side for those classified staff. And I should have said, just stop me if you have questions as we go. So when we're looking at staffing units, the vast majority of our staffing units are housed in what we call BEA, which is basic education. So it's, you walk into a third grade classroom, that's generally a BEA classroom. So that's the vast majority of where our staff are housed and paid from. So when we're looking at the certified FTEs, so a full-time equivalent, so you have a teacher that teaches all day long, every single day of the school year, they are a 1 certified FTE. And the funded units presented here are from the 21-22 school year. So they don't reflect any changes for the next school year, just to clarify. So what we're looking at here is if there was no changes in the funding formula, how many staffing units in the certified staffing basic ed would we be allocated? And then that actual is the actual number of staff that we employ in those categories in basic education. So as you can see, classroom teachers and specialists is over quite a lot. Generally, what that's going to mean is our class sizes are lower than what the state provides us staffing for, which is not a bad thing, right? And then some other categories like the non-classroom based specialists. Those are some of our special ed and BEA specialists, some coordinator and district level support, and some behavioral specialists as well. So as you can see, there's some gaps definitely within the different categories. And the only category that really you have to hit kind of the state funding model with is K-3 class size. So that's the only category currently that requires what we call compliance. So if you don't staff to a certain level, then you don't get the full amount of funding. So looking at the classified side, it's a lot less pretty of a picture. These staffing formulas are very outdated. I don't believe they've really changed much since the model was put into place a number of years ago. And so pretty much every single category is under what I would consider underfunded. And so you can see about 58 to 59% of our classified staff in basic education are funded from the state's perspective, and about 41% are unfunded. And those are the positions that are generally funded from levy and other sources of funds, either, depending on our financial situation, either fund balance, or we have some other little smaller revenue streams that come in, miscellaneous local revenue and that kind of thing. So I have some ratios, like we talked about the last time with the how many students does it take to fund a psychologist and that kind of thing. So the teaching assistant, which is paraeducators, the least amount of students that needs to fund one paraeducator is 430 students. So essentially, a whole elementary school would pay you one staffing unit in a para. For office staff, that number is 180. So 180 students gets you one office staff member. 200 students gets you a custodian. 4,255 students get you a student/staff safety person. 4,850 students get you a family advocate, and 1,590 students get you one technology staff person for your whole district. And so some of those numbers, as you can see, really don't drive very many staffing units considering the size of our district. So why is this important? So as I said before, essentially what this means is that the unfunded staffing units, obviously they have to be paid from somewhere. So the vast majority of them are paid from levy funds. Like I said, also we have some other smaller funding sources, but the majority are levy funded. And when salaries are increased for employees, either in a formal collective bargaining group or in an informal bargaining group, all staffing members in that category and unit get the increase, not just certain people, unless that's how it's bargained. So even funding sources that don't increase for inflation, they also bear the burden of the increased staffing cost. And sometimes that means that we need to make some hard decisions about what is paid for from those funds. Take a federal grant, right? And the staffing cost in that federal grant increases. So that might mean they're not able to support as many staffing hours as they used to be because they have to pay an increased salary for those staff. Also, because the state funding formula doesn't provide those realistic staffing units, that's really why the levy and levy funds are so important to local districts, is for us to be able to make the decisions locally that we need to make our schools operate the best we can. And to layer icing on the cake. So as you guys have been hearing over the last couple of years, we receive regionalization, which is essentially the state's effort to provide us additional funding to reflect the fact that our cost of living here is just a little bit higher. And they have decided that they're going to decrease that 1% every year for us. So as you guys can see, by 25, 26, unless they change the formula, we will not be receiving regionalization. So at the end of the day, while other districts are receiving 5.5% to pass or to help pass on to their staff, we're receiving 4.5% with the expectation of providing 5.5%. I'm going to take a short pause here and see if you guys have any questions on that part. Okay, we're gonna move on. So this is the same information as we went over last meeting, but now we're really going to dive into the category for physical, social, emotional staff. That's basically the new bucket that the state has created for nurses, social workers, psychologists, counselors, and student staff safety personnel, as well as family advocates. And this group is essentially one bucket, and it is compliance based. So once you're provided, your staffing units, if you don't staff to that level, the state will take those staffing units back and that revenue back. These are just, again, going over the increase in staffing units. And we will jump right into what does it mean for us. So once again, we're only looking at basic education. That is where the impact will be on the formula. It will not impact any other programs like special education or career technical, the tech center, or anything like that. So along the top, you will see the total funded staff units. So that is the estimate of the staff units that we would be receiving from the state for all categories. So nurses, social workers, psychologists, counselors, staff safety, and the family advocates all together. Then the columns represent the 22-23 old is using the projected 22-23 enrollment, but using the old formulas. So we can see, you know, if there was no formula change for next year, how many staffing units would we be staffed at and how many staffing units would we be over for this bucket? And then what is the impact of that formula change, which is the 22-23 new column. And then looking in the out years 23-24 and 24-25, because this is a 3-year phased in approach from the state. So as you can see, the 22-23 old, we would be receiving about 18 staffing units, and we almost have 18 staffing units just in counselors, let alone the other categories, nurses and safety. The safety also includes our SROs, so contracted staff are allowed to be counted towards compliance. And we do pay for our SROs. So at the end of the day, based on our 21-22 staffing with the old formula, we were over, we staffed more than the state provided by about 10 staffing units. When you look at the new formula, that number decreases to about 4. So essentially we're getting an additional 6 roughly staffing units to help support essentially the staffing that we've known all along that we've needed. That's why we hired them. And now the state is finally starting to recognize that. And so as you can see, starting in 23-24 is when, you know, we're able to really see that change and get into that positive difference between the state funded units and our current staffing levels. So our implementation plan for this bill, because it is great that we're getting additional staffing units, and you know, it is a fine balance between adding the staffing units to the system, which are generally permanent positions, and then also helping to create that you know, sustainability for something that we've been investing in all along. Which is really where we tie back into the previous part, right? Where we're looking at not just this category, but all categories with the funded versus unfunded staffing units, classified staff, certified staff, everybody. Because at the end of the day, it's a system, and balancing the finances of the system in general as a group is what the budget is about. So our plan for next year is to add 1 additional nurse at the high school. Right now, the high school has 1 nurse for 2,000 students, which for most people would probably make them want to cry on a daily basis. So the plan is to add an additional nurse at the high school. So that would make a total of 2 nurses there. The other add for next year would be 4 behavioral specialists, which would create a total of 7 for the whole school district. And the focus of the work of those specialists would actually be to support teachers in classrooms to help support student behavior and be able to, you know, support the teachers in redirecting that behavior in the moment in their classroom, giving them tools to be able to do that. And also helping them outside of the classroom address those behaviors. You know, if they have a behavior incident that happens, they can reach out to the specialist and put a plan in place for that student and keep trying to help support the student with those behaviors. So even with those additions, the 5 additional staffing units, there would still be a decrease in the unfunded staffing units. So the bottom number, and we'll see that here in a second. The plan is also to continue with our student support specialists. And those are actually supported through Children's Home Society. So they're contracted staff. And we've been paying for them the last year out of CARES funds. And the plan would be to continue that for next school year. And then during this next school year, also really have those deep conversations with the administrative team to really find out what is, what do they think is needed in their schools? What makes, what would be good value add for them and for their student population and for their staff population? Because each building has their unique circumstances. And so we want to make sure that we're allowing voice for that. So this is the impact of those decisions in the next school year. As you can see in the 22-23 new column, let's see what's on here. Oh, there we go, that column. The nurses move from 6.4 to 7.4, and the 4 behavioral specialists are added. So with those changes, that moves our unfunded staffing units to 9, essentially. And then rolling into the 23-24 school year, that would be roughly 4. And then in the 24-25 school year, with just those staffing levels, we would need to add staffing depending on enrollment to be able to maintain our full state funding. Because if we kept it as is, the state would essentially reduce 2 of our staffing units because we aren't using them, so they would take them back. I think another thing on this point is, depending on the financial ability of the district, it could be, depending on what things look like, maybe it's not 24-25 that we add those staffing units, maybe it's 23-24. Financial conditions will kind of dictate some of that. And then also, building and student need.
Just for clarification, you said we already have 3 behavior specialists.
Yes.
So we're adding
Good
4 more.
point. Yes. So the 3 are currently funded out of special education. And so this again is just basic education. Yeah, and the 4 added are, the conversation has been K-12 district-wide, all students, receiving the support.
So that's probably actually a good point to make. Even the parent involvement, we have family advocates, they're funded out of a different source. And so you will see things on here that have 0s or 5s, and maybe there's more than that. It's just different funding sources.
Okay, any questions on that? Because the rest is just review. Okay. So at the next board meeting, regular board meeting at the end of this month, we'll have some enrollment projections for all programs. So we'll expand beyond basic ed and CTE. So we'll look at all programs. I'm hoping the preliminary revenue for the state will be available. I heard today that they're almost ready. So we'll see. And then staffing costs for 22-23 based on the information that I know as of that date. And so that will be April 26th. And that's it.
Jeanette, thank you. I think you wowed the board.
Save the questions for the workshop.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next item on the agenda is our one action item, which is director districts.
Yeah, tonight we bring back Danielle to
give a brief presentation to the board, again, reviewing the statute on the Voting Rights Act and where the district can be. We presented the 3 director districts and the 4 director districts. The 3 director districts would have 2 at large. The 4 would have 1 at large. So again, Danielle will do a quick review and then open it up for board questions. And then we will see where the board's at to take any action. Martin?
I think we should let Danielle go right ahead.
Thank you, Martin. So last time we gave a high level view of all the steps to get from point A, where we are now at all at large districts, to point B, which is trying to redistrict or create voting director districts. So now we're going to concentrate on 2 things: the prerequisite to start that whole process, and then the first step of that process. So overall, we need to look at the entire process under the construct of our board policies, because the board policies are the law for this school. Okay, this is better. So the board policy is outlined on this slide, and it essentially is that the board will ensure that its voting system does protect protected classes. Next slide. So the prerequisite that I was talking about is outlined in the statute. And the prerequisite is that the district has to make a finding that there is the potential for a violation of the Washington Voters' Rights Act. Not that there is a violation, but that there is a potential for that violation. And then once the district makes that finding, then it can invoke its power under the statute to change its electoral system. And if you look at that bottom portion of this slide, it's that once the board also invokes that power has to be used and finished by November 15th of this year. So if the board does make that finding that there's the potential in its current system that a violation could occur, then the system to break up into voting districts needs to be completed by November 15th of this year. So to make that prerequisite finding, these are the factors that the statute lays out to determine when there has been a violation. So these are the factors you're going to be looking at to say, is there the potential for that violation in our current system? And if you look at just the last election, there were some statements that were directed toward the race or ethnicity of certain candidates. When talking about CRT, there was a published post on social media where one of the candidates was being described as apologizing for being white. Our current board member, Ms. Iniguez, was described as, we don't need a Latina beauty queen on the board. So there were those certain statements that were made in this last election. And then if you go to the election right before that, we had Karina Vega-Villa, who essentially was running unopposed because the white male candidate that she was running against attempted to drop out, published in a newspaper that he was dropping out, yet he won the election against her. And then the election before that, you had Claudia de Robles, who was a Latina appointed board member that did not win her election seat against a white candidate. So you have some of those issues going back through the last few elections. So here are those 5 steps that we talked about. And we're going to concentrate now on step 1, is drafting the plan. So when you're looking at drafting the plan, the statute does lay out certain factors that the board must consider. And I don't want to read you the factors, but they are there, and they're in the last presentation that we also covered. So there have been some questions about, what other data can we use? When we are looking at these factors, what data can we look at? And you mostly look at the census. So there are various statutes, and I pulled out some snippets out of a few of the statutes that talk about using the federal census data and how it can be used. You can't use it to favor or disfavor a certain racial group or political party, but you also cannot use it to dilute or abridge the rights of voters who are members of a protected class. So once you look at the factors and you have two proposed plans that the staff has put before the board, and you need to look at those proposed plans in light of the statutory factors. So the two plans are the 3 director districts with 2 at-large positions, or 4 director districts with 1 at-large position. I was curious about what our neighboring districts, school districts have looked like in terms of voting districts. So I spent a bit of time this morning contacting 6 different school districts. Cascade has 5 districts, so all of their board members are assigned to a voting district. Kashmir has 4 districts with 1 at large. Eastmont has 3 districts with 2 at large. Chelan has 3 districts with 2 at large. Moses Lake they have broken up into all 5 districts, and Waterville has 4 districts with 1 at large. So even when we're looking at our community here in North Central Washington, almost every school district has broken up into voting districts. So what does the board have to do? Well, they have to take some action. So there's 2 sets of actions that the board has to take. The first action is they have to make that prerequisite finding that the current electoral system has the potential to violate the Washington Voters' Rights Act. The second action that the board has to take in this process is that they have to propose a plan to the public. So there are potential proposed motions that are in the board's packet. And I broke up those motions so you can see where those motions fit in our overall plan for step 1. So that first motion is talking about making that finding for the prerequisite to invoke its statutory authority to change the electoral system. And then the other 2 motions go under step 1 for proposing the plan. So we kind of broke up the 2 motions under the proposing the plan, because if the district or if the board doesn't make a decision about which plan it wants to propose, it can at least make the motion to say our potential violation is going to be remedied in this way, i.e. it's going to be remedied by breaking up into voting districts. So after the board has determined, made that prerequisite finding, determined the remedy it wants to take for that potential violation, and also has determined which voting district plan it wants to propose to the public, then the next step after that is you got to tell public. So you have to provide notice to the public, and that notice is written and verbal notice, air, radio, television, and that notice has to be given in English and Spanish. Any questions on the overview? Okay.
My questions stem a lot from my own inability to explain to the public why we must do this. When I look at the policy that we have, I saw the 4 kind of criteria and the receipt of the federal decennial census data from the redistricting commission. That is the reason that we're moving forward on this, because the other 3 don't apply. But it also says that this policy says that we need to present a plan, propose a plan, have a plan, make a plan, but it doesn't say anything about executing that plan. Am I reading that correct? Is that correct?
Are you talking about the school policy?
The policy, yeah, the school policy.
The policy may not, but then you also have, wait, let me double check. So under the policy, it says to remedy a potential violation. To me, that says that the district must take some sort of action because it has to propose a remedy. And then if you look at the procedure, there is a procedure laid out under 1105P that talks about how the district is going to enact that action and that remedy to change the electoral system under the WVRA.
So again, still just a plan and how we would implement the plan, but we're not obligated to execute the plan.
No, you are obligated to execute the plan. There's statutory language under the Washington Voters' Rights Act that once that plan has been adopted, so after you've done your proposal to the public, after you've had your public hearing, after you've done a formal adoption, you have to actually implement that plan. And that plan has to be implemented at the next general election.
Kind of my last question. And again, I ask this because people are asking me and I don't have an answer for them, as to why we're doing this. What is the data that would show a violation of the Voter Rights Act? I mean, so what I have heard in the past when we've talked about this is a potential lawsuit. Somebody could say I'm not represented, or it's hard to understand because anybody can run for the school board. So saying that we must break things down into a district so that then only people from this district can run when they weren't prevented from running before is hard to explain. So what is the actual data that would show that we are in violation of the voter rights Act?
Okay, let me just clarify. I'm not saying that you are in violation. I am saying that there is the potential for that violation. And because there is
Right.
that potential for that violation, the board can change its electoral system.
Right, and I understand
Okay.
that. I do understand that. I know we're not in violation of that. Yeah, but can you describe to me what that data would, what is the data that would show that we could potentially be sued for being in violation? Am I making that?
Well,
Question there?
besides the anecdotal evidence that I just presented previously about the last couple of elections, let's talk about the nation as a whole. So prior to the Washington Voters' Rights Act, you had the Federal Voting Rights Act,
Right.
and that was enforced by the Department of Justice.
Mhm.
If you look at that act and look at how the department enforced that act, which is similar, but to the Washington Voters' Rights Act, but Washington it's much more protective of the voter rights. So it's easier to show a violation under the Washington Voters' Rights Act than it is under the Federal Voters' Rights Act. So under that backdrop, you can look at what the Supreme Court has made rulings on that have said at-large voting schemes may operate to minimize or cancel out the voting strength of minority members of the voting population. And the US Supreme Court made that statement in 1986. After that statement was made, the Federal Department of Justice started taking a lot of cases to court. And if you look at their history in the last 24 years, they took 17 cases to court and prevailed, showing that at-large voting systems violate the Voting Rights Act. And if you look at their total cases that they took for violations of the Voting Rights Act, the at-large basis made up for half of them. And you also, once the Washington Voters' Rights Act was enacted in 2018, we have a lot of groups that are becoming very active in challenging local governments that have at-large systems similar to the board. So just locally within the last couple of years, you have a challenge made Franklin County, a challenge made to Yakima County. City of Yakima was sued and lost to keep their at-large system. Not only were they sued, they had to pay approximately $3 million to the ACLU because the ACLU was successful in challenging their electoral system, their at-large electoral system. And what we're seeing in these local challenges now is we're not seeing current, residents being the powerhouse behind these types of actions. You are seeing the support of outside entities that are moving forward on these types of challenges. So you have groups such as the University of California, Los Angeles, the Voting Rights Project group, who is promoting these, finding a resident and then making that challenge. You have the League of Latino American Citizens, you have the ACLU, you have One America. So it's, in my opinion, better to be proactive on this issue rather than having one of these entities come in and challenge you. Because once one of these entities comes in, they get a seat at your table on how you're going to remedy the violation. Right now, the board is in charge of its own destiny. If there's a challenge, that power is reduced a bit because you have to allow another entity here to have a voice.
And so
I'm sorry, that was bad wording. I'm not saying that the board is the only voice either, because the public has a great voice. Because you have to provide the information to the public, they get to have a say on what that plan is. And the board has to take that into consideration. So if it changes its plan after the public has had that hearing, you have to then have another public hearing if you modify that plan and have the public have another chance to voice their concern.
the districts that you listed, every one of those districts that you listed has already done this. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Is that what okay.
Mhm.
Okay. And I did have a question about then what do we do once we hear from the public, because it kind of was little short in the public. We'll hear what they have to say. They can comment. And then we were, scooching, kind of I didn't see what the result then could possibly be if the public is like, meh, or whatever they might say.
Mhm.
Didn't see anything like that listed in there. And then finally, I've lost it.
I would also say you guys are not the only school district in the state that are undergoing this system either. Pasco School District is doing this same process right now.
So my last question was, I'm seeing that tonight we are voting possibly on a plan to have the 3 districts or 4 districts, or just voting that we're going to move forward and we decide the 3 or 4 districts and at large later. Was that what I saw in the 2 sections there?
Can you take it back to the motions,
Yeah,
the proposed motions?
please. Thank you.
The 10, number 10. So we kind of broke it up into 3 separate steps, right?
Uh-huh.
So the first one, you still need to make a motion for the prerequisite. Second one is to the remedy for the potential violation is to breaking up in districts. I am not standing here to say that you have to choose one of those today, but you are under a clock. So if you don't choose it today, you got to choose it soon so you can satisfy those remaining steps. So under the proposing plan, the board could conceivably just pass that first motion. Did that answer your question, Ms. Thomas?
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate your patience with me.
No. You want to give me?
Did it work?
Okay.
Hello?
Here, it will be like a game show.
I can use Maria's, it's fine if you.
It doesn't matter.
Or you could sing.
I think yours. This, I'll use Maria's. So just so I'm perfectly clear on this, we have in some ways put together a plan now if we were to redistrict by having these 2 options, but that in and of itself is not sufficient without kind of invoking the actual process. So what I'm saying is somebody could still come here and say, you need to do something. It's not enough for us to say, well, we started to plan. We have these options available if we ever need to use them. That doesn't satisfy.
Correct.
Okay.
Even though you are voluntarily moving forward at any point in the system, if a resident believes that you're not moving fast enough, if a resident believes that one of your proposed plans isn't good enough, a challenge could always come.
Okay. So just sitting here on these plans isn't meeting the statutory intent.
No.
Okay. So then my next question is, in the public participation process, what I'm hearing tonight is that if we make this first finding, we're committed to some form of redistricting by November 15th.
You're committed to remedying the violation, the potential violation. Let me clarify. You are committed to doing that. The statute says the remedies include but are not limited to breaking up into districts, voting districts. So that's not necessarily the only remedy that you can look at. That is the remedy that we have been moving toward, but that's not the only remedy.
Do we have examples of the other potential remedies?
Yeah, we do. Bear with me for a sec. I'm hoping I brought it. Yeah. So one of the potential remedies in one of the other local government cases or challenges, the proposed remedy was to do a multi-winner ranked choice voting system. And I didn't know what that was. So I had to go to the ranked choice voting resource center and look it up. To me, it seemed very complicated. And I am not well versed in how to describe it. But what I can do is I can give what I copied to Kim, and then she can pass it out to the board. So.
Where has that successfully been implemented?
I believe New York.
Yeah.
I know Washington, citizens within Washington tried to get it passed in the state about 2 years ago. That was unsuccessful as well. There are states around the country that do use a rank order system. It gives opportunities for other individuals to be part of the kind of the top two. And they try to bring in more individuals into the voting process through it, as opposed to just maybe a highly funded first candidate. It isn't just the only person who gets voted in. But New York had it. But if you harken back to that election, it took a few months to determine the actual winner. It is complicated. It's about the only way to say it's a complicated process to go through and for people to understand, quite honestly.
So is it fair to say, oh, sorry, now it's too loud. Is it fair to say then that the redistricting is the more obvious remedy, or could we be challenged if we tried to pick in the same way that a person could challenge just?
Well, I think what you pointed out earlier, Ms. Norton, was accurate, is that you can be challenged at any point in the system. So if you propose this multi-winner ranked choice voting system, you can still be challenged. The remedy that is stated in the statute says, including but not limited to breaking up into voting districts. They proposed no other remedy in the statute, or they didn't list another remedy in the statute.
So I guess my final question then is, if we were to proceed tonight by making this preliminary finding, which commits us to action to remedy the violation by potential violation by November 15th. How does the public process really work? Because what I'm hearing is there's no ability now for the public to say, no, we just don't want this. We think your finding's wrong.
Well, there's always that statute in Title 28A for school districts that say if the board makes any arbitrary and capricious, does any arbitrary and capricious action, there's a general appeal to judicial review. That's the only way I think they can review your finding. So is there any way? There's a possible one way.
And I think the only reason I mentioned that is because I am a little concerned that it almost feels backwards that we're potentially picking an option before the public has really weighed in. And is this something they want anyway? And knowing if we pick that we're going to do something that there's no way aside from an arbitrary and capricious challenge, which obviously we're not going to hit that standard. So,
well, let me just
makes me
clarify.
nervous.
Yeah, I'll make two comments. One, I think the many statutes, I think, work backwards. And I don't think the legislatures necessarily look at how it's going to work in practice. That aside, though, it's not necessarily backwards in the fact that you have to propose the plan for the public to comment. You just can't have, an infinite number of potential possibilities and then take public comment on everything. So you have to tell the public at least what you're moving toward. But that doesn't mean you are committed to the plan that you are proposing today. Like Ms. Thomas, when we talked about her questions, the board at any time prior to its adoption can make modifications to the plan. And that modification could be, okay, we don't like a 4-to-1. We actually like a 3-to-2, or we like an all 5 districting. So just because you're proposing, or if you choose to pick a plan to propose today, you're not wedded to it.
Last question. So the statute requires a public process. If we wanted to, say, delay one more meeting to maybe allow a voluntary opportunity for public to comment, we could do that. And
prior to the, sorry to interrupt you, prior to the proposed, prior to putting a proposed plan out there?
Yeah, prior to making the finding that the board's supposed to make, we could, in theory, voluntarily have a public comment period and then make this decision and still be okay on time-wise to get to November 15th.
Okay on time-wise, well, I don't set the pace for your action, but I think we had one public comment. So it has been out there, but yeah, I'm not saying today the board has to pass any motion or to take any action. Staff and legal recommendation is to take some sort of action today to start that process rolling.
And I think maybe for clarification is, if we don't make that finding today, there's still time in our schedule that we could get where we need to go if we need to do it.
You can always do things faster or slower.
Okay.
So you do it on your own pace, but there is just the requirement for the public hearing. And then if you make tweaks to your plan, you got to have another public hearing. Make another tweak, you got to have another public hearing. So the board can make it as slow as fast as it wants to, but we are under that deadline. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
So I think what you're asking is if there somehow we can get this information out to the public now, and then next board meeting, take comments on it, because at this point, thank you very much for your comment, but we should hear from some more people on this. And I don't think that the public is necessarily very aware of this whole process that's going on. Is that kind of what you're thinking? Give one more board meeting before we move forward so that we can hear some comments about it?
Yeah, I mean, in theory, it was just, is there a timeline that would allow for us? We're not, there's not a 180-day requirement that we have to hit by doing something today. It's just making sure that if that was a direction that the board wanted to go, to say, hey, before we even make this finding and proposing redistricting as a solution, is this something the community knows enough about and wants to see happen? Because it's a massive change. I'm not saying it would change what we do or not. I just want to make sure that if we didn't feel comfortable making this finding today, there's enough time that we could still get where we need to go if in a meeting or two we had it back on here.
But let's just have that backdrop of the reminder that you can have a challenge and then you're not necessarily going to be totally in control. Right. Okay.
Thanks. I think we've heard from 2 board members, and thank you, Daniel. Any other board members have any questions? At this
Yes,
point?
I'm ready to comment. See
Okay.
my green light right here. So I really do like the aspect of us being in control of semi-control of the process. I think for me, it's of paramount importance that the board should be representative of the community and our students. Do I believe that this districting is the best way to accomplish that? I'm not sure. Before tonight, I never knew there was another option. So I really would be interested in knowing more about what that is. And if it comes out for public review and it is indeed too complicated or ridiculous to even consider, then maybe the districting is the way to go. But I would be in favor of making the motion that we would recognize that our voting system may impair members of the protected class to have equal opportunity. We certainly have seen anecdotal evidence of that over time, and it's seemed unfair and hurtful. So I do really appreciate that there is public input involved. How much public input? I'm curious about what, is that just a hearing? It's presented at a board meeting and we take public comment. Okay, good. So the whole districting thing has just felt, because of the component of, some unknown person or entity who may not even live here comes forward and makes a complaint, it has felt forced. So I've not liked that aspect of it. So I really would like to have the opportunity, like I said before, to at least look at a different option. Also, I'm wondering about whether the board could benefit from the auditor's input. That person is responsible for running elections in our county and in our district, and she may have some insights that would be helpful. My apologies to him. I was thinking of the assessor.
I agree with what Laura said. However, this is a conversation that we as a board have been having, with the exception of Catherine, for at least 2 years. I believe it was probably about 2 years when you first presented to the board on our options. And as mentioned, having gone through an election myself, the potential is very much there of a potential violation. I am here to tell you, and we don't have enough time tonight for me to share all my stories of my experience. And I'm sure the previous board members that were once appointed and ran their election can probably share similar stories. And personally, I made the assumption that all candidates were going through the same experience and talking about it. That wasn't the case. So like I said, the potential it's there, and I'm here to tell you that. Another thing is that Wenatchee is on the radar with ACLU, with the Latino Community Fund, as well as the Latin American citizens. There's currently a lawsuit against Chelan County against the
auditor.
Yes, exactly. The auditor Skip Moore in regards to Latino votes. So we are on the radar. And Again, this is not a new conversation. We've been having it. I think this is the third time we've seen Danielle here, probably about the fourth or fifth time we engage as a board on this conversation. So I'd be more than happy to sit down for a couple hours if anybody wants to hear my personal experience and stories. I agree, we need to have, I think it would be wise to have, the next plan. Okay, well, maybe I'm in fully support of moving forward. And then at what point do we hear the vote, the community's input as to, I'm curious, do we go 5, 3, 4? Thank you for your public comment. We've also been getting emails. So let's not forget, actually about 2 weeks ago, I think last time Dan presented on it, we started getting a handful of emails as well. So we have heard from the public that's been in tune to it.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that the lawsuit filed against Chelan County, it's pending in the Federal District Court of the Eastern District of Washington. It was filed May 7th. Wait a second here. Oh, excuse me, May 20th, 2021. And it was brought by a current resident and the League of United Latin American Citizens and the Latino Community Fund. And it's still pending.
Okay. I was going to make one quick comment on the hypothetical alternative. I believe it is similar to the single transferable vote system that around the world people have used to try and break the power of major political parties. It does exist, but it is not common, and it's pretty, I would call it experimental in the United States. So I was going to, first of all, thank Danielle for doing the job that she is supposed to do as our legal counsel, giving us an objective and broadly based summary, as you've done several times over the last 2 years. That's my first point. It was thorough, comprehensive, and laid out the facts. Secondly, if we look around ourselves, whether we look at the city, whether we look at school districts, whether we look at the state, if we do a risk analysis of dollars and cents and court cases, I think that the probability is pretty strongly aligned with the recommendation we've received from the administration of proceeding. There is a requirement both in our policy 1105 to adhere to the laws and do so in a timely manner. And there is a process that we could set in motion today that has sufficient time to meet the November deadline, that enables public input, but requires, first of all, the board to make a finding and the board to put something on the table, which can then go through a very formal public comment process, a full legal advert and process, and could result in changes to that plan and affect the timetable. So I see this as amply put forward before the board. I appreciate my colleagues' questions and concerns, and I want to thank you, Danielle, for handling them so well today. At this point, I think I want to move from discussion to ask whether any board member is willing to put forward a motion on the finding.
I viewed my points more as questions for Danielle, not necessarily comment. And so.
Okay, questions. Do you wish to make a comment at this point?
So yes, I just want to say thank you for confirming the information I needed to proceed. I appreciate you bringing the evidence because that was one of the questions I had. What are we looking at in terms of the voting violations, potential violations? And I thought that was helpful. So the questions were truly just, is this setting the path? Not that I'm trying to balk or stall or anything. I was just understanding the ramifications if we proceed. Having said that, I agree that there's evidence out there. It's better to be proactive than reactive. I am concerned, given our highly publicized elections last year, that we are a target for a potential action. So I see it as being very real that we do need to do something. And so the questions were, if we, truly, if we make this finding now, we are committed to doing something. And so that was helpful to hear. And then just understanding the process. So that's, yeah.
Thanks. Thanks for that clarification. Sorry that I was premature. We'd have to go to a motion to go to discussion, but just to make sure I haven't missed any other questions while legal counsel still has the podium. Thank you very much.
I would like to make a motion. Are we making a motion? Yeah. I would like to make a motion that the board finds that our current at-large voting system may impair the ability of members of a protected class to have an equal opportunity to elect candidates of their choice. And as a result of dilution or abridgment of the rights of voters who are members of the protected class in violation of the RCW 29A.92.020.
Thank you, Laura. Is there a second for that motion?
I will second that motion.
Thank you, Maria. Is there any discussion on that motion?
Just in support of my vote for the reasons mentioned before. And then again, it just goes back to the previous public comment that we had in regards to hiring teachers of color. And I think if we have that opportunity to bring that possible, again, there's no guarantees that would happen to our board of directors, and then, you know, the trickle down effect that it has through our district could make a great impact.
Thank you. At that point, I will then call for a vote on the motion that there is a finding. Those in favor of that motion, please signal by saying aye.
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 Are there any nays? No. At that point, the next step, if we were to proceed, would be for somebody to make a motion to move forward with division of the district into director districts, school district into director districts. Do we have somebody to propose that motion?
I would like to make a motion that we propose that the district plan, which would include 4 director districts and 1 at large.
Well, just into districts first. The nature of it would be next.
Gotcha. Okay. So then I would like to make a motion to move forward with division of the districts into director districts.
Do we have a second? I am willing to second that motion. Do we have any discussion?
I did not want to second the motion only because I'm not prepared, having just heard about the multi-winner ranked choice voting system, which sounds very bizarre, but I would at least like the opportunity to understand it more before making a decision about moving into districts at this time. So I am not going to be in favor of moving forward with that motion at this time.
Okay, if I give my personal opinion, I think that is somewhat theoretical, but I think it should be considered. And I believe we could handle that if we had to. At that point, is there any further discussion? With those in favor of, let me correct that, moving forward with division of the school district into director districts, please signal that by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
With those not in favor, please say nay.
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 There are 3 nays, and did I hear?
Good point.
I'm confused by what you say, that you do not wish to move forward. Oppose the motion, then, okay, that's fine. Do the people who wish to oppose the motions wish to speak, say so?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, there are 3 who oppose the motion, therefore the motion fails.
So what administration will do is bring back the voting tiered system to ensure the board has an understanding of the other option. And then we will bring an additional recommendation back to the board at the next board meeting.
Is there some way that we can notify, make an announcement to the public about this a little bit more, maybe possibly saving that second public notice that we have to have down the road?
Don't know.
Is there?
Yeah, that.
No,
part-
no, absolutely. But we were talking about how, okay, if we got citizen comments and then we tweak the plan and have to have citizen comments again, can
I
we
can highlight
somehow?
it in our board
Yeah.
summary.
Yeah,
we
so
can
that
make
we
that
can
a-
possibly get public feedback
Yeah, I can make that.
beforehand and tweak it, not have to do two public meetings.
I can highlight it.
Just for clarification, what kind of feedback are we seeking?
I'm just going to be highlighting
Oh,
that
okay.
there is an opportunity. The board will be considering these two options, the
Gotcha.
rank order and the 3 or 4
Director
director
districts.
districts. That's all I'm going to be highlighting.
The next item on the agenda is board communication. And so board members will have an opportunity to bring to attention anything they want.
break.
It's been, yeah, a couple of weeks, but we have had opportunities to be in the schools. Sadly, I missed you on my visit to Mission View, but had the opportunity to see another PLC working group for 3 separate grades and have them come in and meet with their interventionists and their PLC lead. And so that was great at Mission View. And also Julie and I had, and this was a great experience for me, or the first experience, had the opportunity to be involved in the hiring of the interviewing, excuse me, of the new principal Pioneer. So that was a neat and very interesting experience. And then the following day, Martin and I went back to Pioneer and did a PLC visit in 6th grade math.
6th grade is correct.
Yes, thank you. And that was also very interesting. It's been very interesting because, as you discussed before, I think Maria, the different levels of PLCs, they vary. And some are just rock stars and they really are, utilizing the PLC process in fantastic ways, and others are learning it. So but it's been good to see, and good to see the different levels that they're working at. And I thank the principals and the teachers for allowing us to come and learn about that in order to try to spread the word on what's happening in schools.
I forget, it has been a while, but I just also want to say that I had the opportunity to view some PLCs at Foothills and Orchard right before the break, and just such good work going on in the schools. And I really appreciate the teachers and the principals for letting us be flies on the walls through that process, and actually being more than flies, because we did ask some questions and whatnot, and they were fantastic. So we've got some really great administrators that bleed this, and it makes me really inspired to see them do this work. Just a quick legislative update. You covered it in your weekly update, but the veto letters that we sent to the governor seem to have worked, because he vetoed the TK part of the bill. So we'll get our TK classes. I love saying that. That's so cute. And then I guess the only other piece is WASA's window right now. If we wanted to propose any changes on their priority proposals, we've got from now until the 20th. And I know we've got a special meeting or a board workshop on the 18th. So if anyone has any great ideas for making changes or suggestions to WASDA, we would potentially have some time if we got notice to Kim to add that to our agenda to talk it through. But I don't have anything particularly of interest, but I just thought I'd get that on your radar just in case.
To add to that, the legislative district representatives will be meeting on the 28th and 29th at a retreat in Pasco, where those priorities will be reviewed. So I believe 2 years ago, we got them through email and we ranked them. Maybe we can do something similar.
Good process.
Doesn't that happen? That part happens later. So this is just WASDA doing their internal work on their policies and then sending out the finals, right? This is just our part to factor in comments to create their list and then
Oh.
their list and then we'll rank, we'll do our.
And I will be quiet for a change. At this point, the superintendent can take over.
Okay. Yes, we were able to hire Jacqueline Estefan as the next principal of Pioneer Middle School. I appreciate everybody's time. We had a large number of staff members. We had parent, we had student, we had board members. It was a really robust interview process. We're excited that Jacqueline will be joining us next year. Jacqueline has both elementary and middle school experience, administration, school principal, assistant principal. She's been a district office leader. Very impressive person that we're excited to welcome into our district. The other piece that I'd like to mention, and the community will be seeing a WSD information tomorrow around volunteers. Again, opening up our doorways back for our parent volunteers. Again, normal process, signing, registering through the volunteer process form on the website and all those pieces. But we really are welcoming back our parents into our classrooms, into our schools for that volunteerism to really support our schools, to support our students. So we're excited about that, but we'll also be sending out a communication as well. In the academic arena, and again, I appreciate the board members being in our schools, seeing the work that's happening, because that's where the real work is occurring. So it's critical that our board members are seeing that. But some of the other work that's happening a little bit more behind the scenes is Sarah Wall is leading a math research team that is coming to some conclusions about where we're going to be at our district with math instruction. Really excited about that work. That has been an ongoing collaboration with the ESD, Dr. Andy Boyd, who is an expert in the area of mathematics. So Sarah and him have partnered with our educators in our district as we're moving down that pathway to ensure the work that occurs in our classrooms, K-12, similar in nature to what we did around structured literacy, that we have a very tight aspect of how we're teaching numeracy. So excited about that work, really proud of all the staff members, educators throughout our district who are participating in that, and Sarah for leading that work there. I think that's it from me. I think that's it. Yes. I knew I forgot it. Yes. Tomorrow night, we have our Education Northwest. We'll be hosting an equity community conversation, cafe style. There are still spots available. If people want to register, you can find that on our website to register for that. But that should be a great opportunity as well to engage our community in the area of equity. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. At this point, we move into closed and executive session. The school board will now enter into closed session in accordance with board policy 1410 and RCW 4230.110. This discussion will be closed to the public. Following the closed session, the school board will enter into an executive session for a period of 60 minutes to evaluate the qualifications of an applicant for public employment or to review the performance of a staff member. The closed and executive sessions are expected to last 60 minutes. The school board is not expected to take final action following the closed or executive sessions.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you everybody for being here.
That was 60 minutes altogether.
Altogether, yes, that's the way yeah. 60 minutes altogether. And I'm going to say we give ourselves a 3-minute mobilization time from one place to another.
Hello, testing. Testing. There's nothing coming through. Until you get really. Test. No. Test. No. Test. 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 Yeah, wait, no, it's still crappy. Yeah, it's not working. All right, so I'll have to figure out, get a hold of the company. Is that audio's off unless you're talking into a mic. No, I can get this stuff. Try the high pass filter. These off maybe. Testing. Yeah, see, because you can see it. That's the crazy part. It is. Yeah, it's not coming through because that's why it kind of sounds funky unless I get really close and it's still not. Test. Yeah, nothing. Testing. Testing. I was hovered over it. Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna have to call the company and find out. Like this transmit is not.
The executive session is extended for an additional 20 minutes. The executive session is terminated and the board meeting is adjourned.